Okay, so I want to start off by talking about like a childhood memory and something that's really stuck with me ever since. 7-year-old me really hated the playground, not because there was really no game that I wanted to play, but because no one really invited me to play a game. And I remember actually that one thing that I would do in the nursery school was whenever the bell used to ring to signify recess, all the kids would rush out and playing hopscotch, and they would wheel each other in different carts, and they would be playing all these different games, and they'd pull out the board games. But I was actually one of the loners, and I was the loner out of the 30 kids in my class, and I would actually, during recess, I would circle and I would trace the yellow line around the playground alone, watching people. It's sad, I know. But I would watch people and hope that they would notice me, and I would hope that one day one of them would approach me and invite me to play a game with them. And the thing is, that same playground in that same school, I actually still attend. And if there's one word I can use to sum up my past 17 years of my life, that word would be consistency. Believe it or not, I've been living in the same bedroom apartment, in the same house. I've been taking the same bus to the same school for the past 17 years of my life. And I've been surrounded by pretty much the same people, some of the same teachers, same family, some of the same kids, friends, neighbors that I've grown up with. And one thing that I really want to stress today is that when you're stuck in this cycle of sameness, you really want to get to know everyone around you really, really well. But there's one person that I actually want to introduce to you today, someone who's actually been with me for 17 years, but someone who, surprisingly, I've only just recently gotten to know. And she should be here, but she is not. Oh, there she is. Okay, yeah, so this is her. Her name's Annie, and she's a security guard at my school. And for 17 years, I would wave to her in the mornings when I came to school. And for 17 years, I would wave to her every afternoon when I left the school grounds. And on Saturdays, on the occasional Saturdays when I'd have to come into school for extra classes or whatever, I'd see her too, working for weekends away. And every single time I waved to her, and I'd just walk past the school gate just for that little walk for about 5 or 6 seconds, I'd actually think about Annie. And I'd think, and the same questions would always pop back into my head. Who was she? What was her life like? Where did she live? Who, after all these years, was the woman in the yellow vest? And so a couple of months ago, I actually did approach her, and I had a great conversation with her, and I actually wrote down her story. And she told me in conversation that life here has become more expensive and jobs are harder to find. It's hard work to raise 3 kids. Sometimes my mother helps to take care of them instead. She's getting old, but I don't know who better to ask. My daughter commutes to school alone, and I already consider myself lucky. This is Annie, and this is her story. And she told this to me one day, a rainy day, I remember, after school, and when I had approached her. And I realized that after hearing what she had to say, there was something more. This was not only the beginning of a relationship between Annie and myself, but I realized that I've been in the same school, I've been pretty lucky to be in the same school community, and yet I haven't really gotten to know a lot of the people around me. This is my geography teacher, someone who's actually taught me since primary, someone who I've had so much admiration and respect for. And I decided to interview her and photograph her, and she told me that she had a younger brother who died when she was 11, and when she was in her final year of university, her father died too. She's really someone who I look up to. She's really a role model. And I began to realize that these photographs and these quotes and these stories were really the start of something new. And then I moved on to, this is Stanley. He's actually the chef at my cafeteria. He serves me every lunchtime. And he told me also about the story of him immigrating to the States before moving here to Hong Kong to achieve his culinary dreams. And on this next slide, I decided to do the same with all of my friends. And these are people who I've grown up with. These are some of my closest friends, people who I've known since I was 3 or 4, people who have come and gone into my life. And I realized that as I began to interview and photograph these people, I was really stringing together these stories of people who really meant a lot to me. But above all, this was the story of my community. And I think that's really what I want to stress today, is that word community. Because for the longest time, I really didn't know what that word meant. And that was really a mission that I set myself to sort of figure out along the way. And as I began to photograph and interview these people, I eventually ended up curating a photo exhibition on my school campus, and I ended up making a hardcover book, which was produced just in time for my school's 50th anniversary. And this was really created for my school community. But again, I still didn't really know what that word community meant. So I went online and I searched it up, and the Oxford Dictionary actually defines it as a group of people living in the same place or having a particular characteristic in common. Now that's a pretty straightforward definition, but to be honest, I think it's pretty dumb, because I think that's just skimming the surface of things. Because to really understand what we mean by community, we have to look at the word community itself. And the way that I like to think of it is that community stems from two main words, and that being communication and unity, as seen on the board. And communication and unity, and these are two core values that are so important in what we call building, what we say, a community. Because without communication and without unity, you don't really have what we call a community. And that speaks volumes in terms of what we mean when we say the power of coming together, the power of being around people. I had recently read in an article that a study by the University of Minnesota reported that people who were strong, close-knit communities, they actually were 50% less likely to die prematurely. And in that same study, they figured out that actually people, when they're faced with a stressful task, they're experiencing a faster recovery rate when they're thinking of people with whom they have strong social relationships with. And that was actually a pretty interesting study because it was a testament to the importance of community. And really, that means that community and well-being go hand in hand, because one doesn't exist without the other. Because at its very core, when we're talking about things like mental health, or we're talking about things like well-being or wellness, we're really talking about the idea of spending time with one another, of spending quality time with friends and family, feeling a sense of being welcomed, feeling a sense of, hey, I belong here, I belong in GSIS, or I belong in CIS, or I belong here in this community, and this is where I belong. And that's the sense of well-being that we get when we can actually rely on one another and hear their stories. And that was exactly what I wanted to get. But there was something that was still bewildering me, there was something that was still bugging me as I was photographing and interviewing these people. And I finally figured it out a couple of weeks ago, was that because I had been, studying that school for a long time, the question to me then became, well, if I'd been studying that school for the longest time, really, and then I'd been in the same community, why did I feel like I was talking to Annie for the first time? Why did I feel like I was talking to some of these people and getting to know them for the first time? Why was community, if it was so important, why was I, building it from a grassroots level when it should have been there in the first place? And to me, that really revealed the irony behind it all. And that's really the irony of my school and the education that I was receiving. And that was the irony of this so-called 21st century global education. Growing up, I was told to embody these high moral values of these learner profiles. I was told to be caring, reflective, risk-taking. I was told to be a communicator. And I found that ironic. Why could I be a communicator when I couldn't even talk to security guards, when I couldn't even talk to people closest to me? I was told growing up to go on, we call it Discovery Week, you might call it Action Week. I was told to travel far and wide to impoverished countries, to foreign countries, to serve other communities when I didn't even know the community in my own home. And I was told, most recently in my own school to embrace mental health and well-being as a part of student life. And I found that ironic as well, because we're told to embrace mental health when we're already isolating a whole group of other people just by not thinking about them. And that was really the sense of irony that I was getting. And I've experienced my fair share of irony as well. Growing up, my teachers actually told me that my English wasn't good enough. My parents told me I was too shy around our neighbors. My friends told me that, I said dumb things in class. But ironically, it was my voice and my interest in people that caused all of this to happen. And I'm really grateful for that. Another thing that I'm actually really grateful for is being able to actually excel in a school that is really abundant in terms of resources. And in the past couple of years, I've actually seen our student support sort of counseling office grow. We've actually quadrupled in size. We've hired more counselors. We've done more about mental health and well-being, and I'm sure many other schools have done as well. But one of the things, and people who know me will know this, I always say that we're skipping some of the first basic steps. Because the way that I like to think about it is that community building and promoting well-being and promoting mental health, it's not really a numbers game. It's not about a school investing in more student support resources. It's not about a school hiring more counselors. It's really about first opening that door of communication. It's about establishing an open door policy, and that starts with talking to people. Because essentially when you have a community, everyone can be anyone's counselor. But the thing is, community is a privilege, and I've realized this having interviewed and photographed everyone. I realized that community is a privilege because it lies with those who remain in power. Community is a privilege because it lies with people who remain heard. And for the longest time, growing up again in that same school, in that same playground, in that same school community, I realized that the school community only belonged to students and teachers. And some of these people, definitely Stanley and Annie, some of the janitors, some of the people who worked in the cafeterias, people who worked behind the scenes, they were invisible, they were isolated. And they were essentially the people who worked behind the scenes. And we never really got a chance to communicate and interact with them. And that was really the irony of it all. And so today, what I really want to urge to all of you is to start questioning things. Start questioning the nature of your education. Start questioning your values. Start questioning the learner profile. Start questioning the nature of your communities and what it really means. The nature of your communities in your neighborhoods, in your schools, in your workplaces, and in your homes. And start asking yourselves the bigger question. Are we actually practicing what we preach? Because if we don't, what's really the point of it all? I realized that, I started off with talking about, 7-year-old me, and I realized that, that memory, actually 7-year-old me, I don't think I really wanted to play necessarily a game. I don't think I was really good at hopscotch or anything, but I really wanted to be a part of something. And it's really bringing to mind that idea of inclusion. And I think that inclusion is really the word of 2019. And yet we're still seeing a lot of really hard challenges that we have to go through. But one of the things that we can do to overcome this idea is just by getting out there and talking to people. And that's exactly what I did. It didn't take a lot of energy, it didn't take a lot of effort, it didn't take a lot of money or whatnot. It really took a camera, but above all, it took my interest in people, in producing this book, and curating a photo exhibition. But above all, it's recognizing that community is around you. And that's the most important thing. Because at the end of the day, 7-year-old me, I don't really want to play a game, I just wanted to be a part of something. And the most important thing is now, in hindsight, having photographed and interviewed a plethora of people from all walks of life. One thing that I have finally learned is that it's not so important in, again, investing in these resources, hiring more counselors. What is important is that we're starting to create a game where everyone plays. And that playground is a community where everyone belongs. Thank you for your time.